Well, today on Diplomat's Corner, we turn our attention to a cultural partnership built on centuries of shared history. Mexico and the Philippines are deepening cultural cooperation, highlighted by several upcoming events. And joining us today to talk about that is Mexico's ambassador to the Philippines, Ambassador Daniel Hernández Joseph. Ambassador, good morning. Thanks for being with us here in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, before we get into the cultural events that are coming up, and they're all exciting, I wanted to talk about, because we were just talking about foreign capital and the other news, I wanted to talk about the state of economic and investment relations between the Philippines and Mexico. Give us a better sense of where we're at.
Well, I think the most important story is an investment where the Philippines is making very important investments in Mexico in port management, in spirits, in microtechnology, as well as some investments from Mexico in the Philippines in animal feed. But there's also a story there with trade where I think the important aspect is how we connect and we become part of chains of production, chains of distribution between Asia and the Americas. Mexico is the first purchaser of Filipino products in Latin America.
That's right. I recently found out we export a lot of electronic products, semiconductor chips and stuff like that.
We are a major world producer of automobiles, mostly light automobiles, although some heavy ones as well, and of electrodomestics. All of these items require electronic components.
Right.
All of them require chips, and those sometimes are purchased from countries like the Philippines.
Right. But it's interesting, though, that there is more Philippines to Mexico trade than there is the other way around.
Yes, but we're working on that. In fact, right now as we speak, there is a trade delegation, actually an official delegation from the Office of the Secretary of Agriculture of the Philippines in Mexico, which we would hope will open up the market so we can export pork and beef to the Philippines.
That's going to be a new frontier entirely, agriculture, because traditionally it's been electronics, motor vehicle parts, and such things, right? How do you see, so when you look at goods trade, and I think I have the chart for that, if I could just pull that up. Goods trade in 2023 came up to, I think that's bilateral, $1.3 billion. We exported just a little over 906 million, importing $352 million. When you look at this picture, what do you think about? Is there room for growth here?
Yeah, of course. There's a lot of room for growth. If you think of it, our total trade worldwide is almost $800 billion.
That's true.
So when you,
Mexico is a powerhouse.
In a sense, when we have trade imbalance within a 1 billion, the important thing is not so much whether there's a balance or imbalance, is how it's contributing to the growth and the development of the economies of both countries, and how it's connecting, like I mentioned, with chains of production and chains of distribution, strengthening the ties. I think Philippines should be, because of our historical connection in trade, should be the natural
partner.
Yeah, the natural doorway in both directions for us to connect with Asia and for the Philippines to connect with the Americas.
Right, because Mexico would be a natural jumping off point for the rest of the Latin American market, while the Philippines would be the same for the ASEAN market. Within the Philippines context, what do you think needs to happen in order to get there, in order for us to achieve more?
Well, I think it's both countries that need to work together. There's been a proposal on the Philippine side to establish a bilateral committee on economic committee, which I think should be an important starting point, because that means that all the stakeholders of both countries would get together and see a bit of where we are and where the reality of trade demands and opportunities actually exist. And that's something that we need to work together on. We're hoping that this will happen in 2026. We will begin actually sitting down and saying, okay, this is where we're at, this is what we've achieved. Where do we go from here now? Given also that there are important shifts in the world in how trade is happening, to say the least. And these changes actually are opportunities.
Right.
They actually open opportunities, and we should see them from that perspective. And I believe there are many between our two countries.
I laugh because that's such a diplomatic way of saying it. Because I'm not a diplomat, I can say it more bluntly, which is that the U.S. has forced all of us to redraw our trade partnerships. And you're absolutely right. For the Philippines, for example, where the government is scrambling to look for other trading partners. For example, further afield from ASEAN, looking at Latin America, and all of that. You know, Mexico has also had to bear the brunt of the U.S. tariffs, right? But the economy is still pretty sound. What lessons do we take away from that?
First of all, we have a free trade agreement with the U.S. and Canada. We're partnered. So when the U.S. imposed tariffs on us, those tariffs apply only to the products that are not part or not contemplated in the bilateral agreement. So at the end of the day, we have been one of the least impacted countries because we are a partner of the U.S. But more important than that, again, I'm sorry I come back to change of production and change of distribution, because when a car is made in North America, it has crossed the border between U.S., Mexico, and Canada on an average 7 times in parts and pieces to
Just
become
putting
a
it
car.
together, right.
And therefore, it's more, our relationship is more about what we build and sell together than what we build and sell to each other. It needs to be seen from a totally different perspective. In that sense, we strengthen each other, the three countries. So the bonds, economic bonds between Mexico, U.S., and Canada, I believe are unbreakable.
Absolutely, and of course, geographically, you can't change anything, right? Let's talk about the defense arena, because as you know, the Philippines has been rallying what they call like-minded countries to try to, as a way to counter China's aggression in this part of the world. It's been trying to work out a lot of visiting forces agreements or similar deals with other like-minded, what they call like-minded countries. Is Mexico part of that conversation?
We're beginning to have some conversations specifically with the Philippines on that. Traditionally, on defense issues, Mexico has been more closed to international cooperation. It's only in the last couple of decades, for example, that we participate in United Nations peacekeeping forces. Our army left Mexican territory for the first time ever to give assistance to the flooding that happened because of a hurricane in the United States, in New Orleans. And that was the first time we left, but it was for humanitarian assistance. So it's just recent that we've had cooperation, mostly training between mostly with the United States, and we're beginning to open up to that possibility. So I understand there are conversations happening with the Philippines in that direction.
Right. It's still very early days.
Very
but in
early
general,
stage.
Mexico is always on the peacekeeping side.
Right.
Okay, so now let's talk about the cultural relations. There are a few events coming up. Talk us through that.
Well, the most exciting thing is that today, actually, if you think of the time change, the 3rd of December in Mexico, we inaugurated the exhibit Somos Pacifico. It's probably one of the largest exhibits on the Manila-Acapulco galleon that we've had. But the most important part of this exhibit is that it is the first time that an Asian perspective on the galleon trade is presented to Mexico. It's a different narrative than what we are accustomed to giving ourselves and to presenting when speaking of the galleon. And I think this will open minds, change views, change perspectives about how the world trade became globalized and how the ones that did it were Mexico and the Philippines.
Right, right. So it brings a spotlight onto the role that the Philippines and the rest of Asia played in opening up the global trade.
Right, and
For
this
the
was
first time ever.
This exhibit was based on an exhibit that was presented in the Asian Civilizations Museum in Singapore. It was curated by the curators at the Asian Civilizations Museum. It took several years, more than 5, in the making, precisely to construct what would be the narrative of the exhibit and how the story of how this trade happened is presented.
Yeah.
So I think that's the key. That's the most exciting thing. It was inaugurated by the president of Singapore.
So it's great that now everybody who goes to that exhibit will get to see the Asian perspective, but is there a chance it could come here? We could
I
bring
hope
the
so. That's going to depend on we can get the financing here. But I will have to underline that there was a lot of support from the Philippines and from Philippine institutions for this exhibit to be presented in Mexico. That
get the details
but
right.
Yeah, so that support, I would hope, will materialize into having the exhibit being shown here.
Because that would be very meaningful for a lot of people to be able to see visually, the Philippines' role back then. 72 years of diplomatic relations the Philippines and Mexico have had. What is next for this partnership? What is next for this bilateral relation?
Well, we already mentioned the issue of trade. I think we need to expand in what we can do together multilaterally. Again, because of the newer challenges, world politics, world trade is changing. So I think this is a time for us to engage in a deeper conversation, because we're both countries that strongly and deeply believe in a rules-based world order, and we deeply believe in multilateralism. So I think there's a tremendous amount of space for cooperation in that field.
And also, we have very deep cultural ties. Of course, there's the Spanish colonial influence, but also Mexico and the Philippines, the people of Mexico and the Philippines share such deep cultural affinities.
That would be a day for a whole other program, because so much of our food in Mexico comes from the Philippines, some of
And
the
vice
food
versa,
here,
yeah.
and vice versa. The clothing, the ways of doing things, the ways of perceiving time and space, the ways of all of these, which are elements
The
of a
family
culture,
ties.
family ties, all of the,
The
elements that
values.
make culture and make identity. We don't realize in Mexico or in the Philippines how much of our own identity comes from each other's views and perspective of the world. So yes, we're brothers and sisters, we're cousins in that sense.
I love how you put it. You have been here 2.5 years. What do you want to achieve for the rest of your time here? What's the big goal?
The main goal is, as I mentioned, the economic one, is to establish the Bilateral Economic Council. I think that's key. To have a dialogue on reopening opportunities for investment, so that we have more investment from Mexico here, so that we have perhaps a more balanced trade, but more than that, a larger trade between the two countries, and that we put more cement into our cultural relations. I think those are the main goals. There's some very specific projects that sometimes don't sound exciting, like a cooperation on paleography with the National Archive of the Philippines. But what this does is this helps each other understand our history better, and that's key to how the peoples of both countries understand their own identities.
And deepening the relations. Yeah. Oh, I would be remiss if I don't mention the name of the exhibit, Somos Pacifico.
Somos Pacifico.
Which means?
We are Pacific.
We are Pacific.
In fact, I borrowed this from a colleague, ambassador in Asia, says we seem to speak of this part of the world as the Far East, but from the Mexican perspective, this is our near west.
Oh, I like that. It's not the Far East, it's the near west.
If you go west from Mexico,
that's right.
There's
it's
nothing
close
but
enough.
ocean and this area of the world.
And then,
so you're our neighbors.
And then also, there is an exhibit coming to the Mall of Asia next year.
Well, there's no, it's not an exhibit. It's going to be a permanent museum.
Oh, okay. Tell us about
be Museo del Galeón, which we're hoping that in 2026 will open. It will have a life-size representation of the galleon based on one specific galleon. So I would encourage people to keep their eyes open for the opening of the exhibit and visit it when it is.
Absolutely. I, for one, am very excited to see it with my kids. Thank you so much. We'll leave it there.
Thank you.
Ambassador Daniel Hernández Joseph from the Mexican Embassy.